What's up, world? What's up, Zion? So, this particular video is gonna be for the continuation of the subject pertaining to plasma, right? So, of course, before we get to the slides, I wanna issue a copyright disclaimer for the copyrighted material that's gonna be shared in this here video, right? So, yeah, let's dive into it. So, there is a recapping that we need to do, right? So we came from here, we went on a side tangent talking about the gods, right, with a small g if you wanna, and also we talked about these guys, right, on top of everything that we done talked about in other videos, right? And of course, now there's a pickup of this tech everywhere, right? We had a talk about that and what I thought that is, and of course, in my goings, this is Babylon, brothers and sisters, right? That is Babylon. So she, or rather he, is pretending to be a woman, hence becoming or embodying the doctrine of demons or the devils, which part of it is androgyny, right? Had a conversation about that, and of course I'm just going to show you some slides and then we're going to try to summarize, right? The need for the international agreement prohibiting the use of environmental and geophysical modification as weapons of war. Briefings on Departments of Defense weather modification activity, right? Operation Popeye, Vietnam War, aluminium dust, right, which devastates not only plants but corrodes people from the inside, right, because aluminium is fire, right? Speaking of fire, right, a retired U.S. Naval Brigadier General, General Charles John, has been quoted from a public source as stating these white aircraft spraying trails of the results of scientifically verifiable spraying of aluminum particles and other toxic heavy metals, polymers, and chemicals. Millions of tons of aluminum and barium are being sprayed almost daily across the U.S., stated Mills, a former naval officer. Alright? Millions and tons of aluminum and barium are being spread across the almost daily across the U.S., stated Mills, former naval officer. Just put aluminum and barium dust on fire and see what happens. It's near explosive, right? You just need aluminum, right? Thermite, if you know what I mean. When wildfires break out, the aluminum barium dust results in levels of fire intensity so great as to cause firefighters to coin a new term, firenadoes. Has said the entire U.S., in addition to various other NATO countries, are being sprayed, right? But again, This is just information control, if you ask me. Right? This is the real news. Thermoionization, right? Phenomenon that people are observing. And I'm gonna speculate, right? It was known as a weapon on Iron Thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death. That is for Mahabharata, right? We've talked about the Indians and their gods and lightning, right? Okay, more details about their weapon. In evidence of atomic blast in ancient times come not only from the Hindu verses but also from ample extensions of fused glass fragments scattered through many deserts and of the world. Silicon crystals curiously cast, resembling remarkably the same fragment found after the nuclear explosion. White sands testing sites. Right? This is the ice, the glass they're talking about. Well, I have alternate explanations. Right? Evidence of atomic blast in ancient times come not only from Hindus, right? More images, right? So the same narrative. And of course, these shards of glass are mostly found in that zone right there, right? That zone, right? That the CASA is pointing out. And we have talked about this electricity effect, right? And basically this is just like a controlled lightning, right? So instead of the wood, it's the sky. It's the same thing, right? It's a conductor, right? And of course, we have these buildings that seem to have melted, right? More. And this is from Iran. These are images taken a long time ago. Don't even know these places exist anymore, right? Well, the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also, the works that are therein, shall be burnt up. Right? And of course, as though with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as molten looking glass. Right? This is just a clue that is being left in the scripture to tell you about the reality. Right? Because these scientists tell us that there is no way that the sky is, as they say here, strong, as in firmament, as in firm. And of course, molten looking glass, right? So what you're looking at is glass, and the blue is water, right? Going back to Genesis, the waters above and the waters below separated, right? The waters above is what we call, or rather what we observe to be the blue sky, but rather what is above us, what encompasses us, is the sky is a glass, right? And they make jokes about it in movies from then and there, right? The Simpsons done did it, right? Hollywood many times, right? So outside is water, lots of it, right? Lots of it. Or did I pick this one? Yeah, that one's for later, right? So what is also being observed, right, that most things that the narrative says were built in the near past were actually way older, right? So here is the states of ice which are many, right? So we have temperature, we have pressure, right? Solid, liquid, vapor, right? For those who know this chart, you can scan it yourself, right? Beautiful. Can see the fields, huh? Speaking of vortices, right? And recently it occurred to me that these people might actually be using my vortex to actually kill me, right? Because sometimes the vortex draws stuff towards me, sometimes it repels. It does both things instantaneously. So yeah, I didn't want to figure out why and how are they infecting with their crap. Are they infecting me with their crap so fast, right? That's the theory. Fighter jets and vortices, right? I recently saw Aston Martin, right? A car from Aston Martin. I think they wanted me to see it. 6 vortex generators, right? That's a cool car anyway. More. And of course, we had a conversation about these. So, today we're going to have a discussion about magic, right? So, at its core, magic is knowledge, not forbidden, but rather stolen from heaven, right? There isn't any other way to put it, right? These angels that were chased from heaven and now reside here on earth, they came with their knowledge about creation, right? And they have taught humans over the years, and in that way the fate of the human beings has become or is resembling that of the fallen angels, right? That this earth is not paradise, it is hell. So we have lessons about the demiurge and movies, Gnostic movies like The Matrix, right? Well, this is the humans embodying the spirit of the fallen. And the spirit of the fallen here would be a sort of hell, right? With all the pleasures the world has to offer. But it gets boring, right? So, focusing on magic, there are many approaches, right? They have many names for themselves. Black magicians, white magicians, it doesn't matter. But it is knowledge nonetheless. And this knowledge, for them, it revolves these things here, right? And of course, I need to emphasize, this is their perspective, okay? They made sure not to share too much so as the humans know exactly what the angels know. No. They lie. Again, the end goal is to shape the human fate to be as of theirs. Okay? Understanding of spirit, understanding of water, understanding of fire, understanding of earth, and understanding of air. They believe that mastering these things makes one do magic, do science, right? So, in their practices, they will involve one of these called elements from their perspective, right? I call them principalities, right? And as usual, we don't talk about the low level stuff. We move higher to the masters because that's where everybody is headed, regardless of their roots, right? They're headed the same way. And there we find blood magic, right? Blood from different sources, right? Some from bugs, some from mammalians, right? And even some from people. And even in the people category, they speculate that different sources have different properties and quote unquote powers, right? So they have a whole dynamic, right? They have children, they have virgins, right? They're big on virgins, right? And children. Those are not safe. Right? Go anywhere. Right? In Africa, in Asia, in North America, in South America. Right? European traditions, right? Virgins are not safe. So, speaking of blood, Blood has all of those things over there. Right? Contains the spirit. That's why we are not really supposed to consume blood. Right? Among many other even scientific reasons that we should stay away from blood. And of course, water. Right? Cannot speak any more about that, right? And then we have fire, right? Plasma and stuff, right? And then we have the earth, right? If you have red blood, that means you have iron, more iron in your blood, right? And if you have blue, that means copper, right? And of course, air, right? So this is the peak of their rituals, right? And of course, amount matters, not that it is necessary, okay? None of this is necessary. I need to emphasize that, right? These angels are just tricking these people into making themselves impure, making themselves a disgusting sight in front of the Creator. You understand? Not that they're supposed to have these group sex activities. No, they're not necessary. Okay? They're not, really. But again, they need to corrupt these people, to shape their fates to resemble the fates of the fallen. Right? So the fire of hell was not in existence before the fall of the fallen angels. It was created as a result of the fallen angels. And later on, it became adapted to even include humans. Okay, speaking of fire element, right? It came to include humans. Why? Because they assimilated, they endorsed, they went along and found themselves in the same predicament the angels were in. Right? So these masons and whatnot, they are not in positions of power, no. They are headed straight where the fallen angels are headed. Okay? So even world politics, they use the same things, right? They go after the spirits, right? People's spirits, using algorithms, right? Water and fire, we cannot say enough, right? From semiconductors to cooling systems for their data servers, right? To their laws, to warfare, right? And then we can talk about earth, right? Rare earth, minerals, And the air itself is a commodity now. People don't know it, and they want to trade it in the stock market. Again, none of this is necessary. So, moving on. So, if you can recall collectively since we began these conversations, we can mainly group our talks into pressure, right, combined with movement, right, and we call those vortices, right, just an aspect of it, right. And the last two things that are remaining are namely the ether. How can I define it? The ether is not God, but it is God. You understand? It's in everything. It permeates everything. There isn't a place that can be called a place that the ether does not affect. Okay? That is the ether. And it always does the opposite for the intention of rest. You understand? When you exert force on the ether, it pushes back with the same amount of force with the intention of finally coming to rest. So again, that brings us to our last element. That is the force, right? I forgot, but I think I will one day. There's some religion out there that believes in the force, because I think, again, they have the knowledge of the devils, right? The knowledge of the devils. So, we have force acting on the ether creating movement, and pressure are the final result. Okay? So, that is what you call nature, right? If you were to go to school, I think you would only need to learn these four things, right? Force, the ether, movement, pressure. I think you would understand everything in these respects, right? I can give you an example, right? Let's talk about energy, right? Let's talk about energy, right? We can talk about the steam engine, right? that utilized pressure to create movement. Why? Because the ether was acting upon the vehicle. So force was applied to the ether. And now we call it horsepower, right? Some vehicles even have 1,000 horsepower. But it's not enough, you see. Right? Why? Because the feedback would be equal. Why? Because the disturbance warrants, understand that, warrants rest. So these elites claim that they done figured out free energy. Is it possible? Yes. Right, I have a couple reactors, okay, that can move bolts of electricity. Okay, you understand when I say bolts? Yes, bolts with not a single moving component. And it's so simple, it's actually stupid. Right? So simple, it's actually stupid. But what I also came to understand is exactly how the environment reacts to this energy source. Right? Because we live in a pressurized dome, brothers and sisters, right? At least we can agree that there is such a thing as pressure. What we can not seem to agree on is that how then is this pressure present also in the presence of the vacuum of space? That's what we are arguing about, isn't it? I don't know how idiotic is the argument, but I am fine to engage in that argument, right? That the higher you go, the lesser the pressure. How is this pressure contained? I say there is a literal glass dome that contains said pressure. You say there is blah blah blah, gravity, this and that, but beyond that there's literally a vacuum of space. Do we need to relearn pressure? But I don't know. Okay, I don't know. But this is a lie that has been propagated for a long time. For a long time. And people have faith that the science is all together. People are used to see, for instance, lightning shooting from up, coming down. But what determines where the lightning goes is pressure. Right? So there are cases, believe it or not, that lightning shoots from down going up. It's all about pressure differences. So for instance, if I look at this image and I grade it by pressure, what would it be like? What happened? Because regardless of what it was that caused this scorching that we are seeing here, also in Southern Africa, I can show you, right? This, you see that on the south, headed northward through Tanzania, right? And indeed, it looks like cracks of electricity that went through the ground, creating these channels. Maybe that's what it was. So, I'm just giving an examples, right? Modern combustion engines, same principles. They utilize pressure, right? Nuclear facilities, they're just pressure cookers without, not the pressure cooker, no, the steam engine without the charcoal or the wood or the coal. But the principle is the same. Steam turns the turbines, directed under pressure, right? What we saw the other day from the guy who made the Super Soaker, right? What he's inventing, it's the same thing, right? Creating pressure. So there's a problem with the free energy device when grid is involved. You see? Because again, you'll be given back the amount that you have taken, right? Because in simple words, the device would turn negative to positive, negative to positive, or positive to negative, depending on what is required, right? So in reality, they are trading energy, right? They're trading energy. Of course, they have to pay, right? They have to pay. And I think we done paid, people done paid at one point. A discharge of some kind. Right? Because it is clear that these people understood energy, right? Our African ancestors and the whole of them, they understood energy. But they only were given half of the story, right? They're only given half of the story. Right? But my knowledge mainly comes from understanding, right? After waking up, so to speak, I started noticing phenomenon and I needed explanations, and it has been a process, right, of understanding these phenomenons, right? Hence I said I'm like the sun, right? The sun is exerting pressure, and the so-called solar rays are moving from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. Right? So that's the clues now, right? The tower of smoke, as per the Moses, right? And the desert, right? The pillars of fire. We then had conversations about that, right? So now you understand. Angels and whatever deception they're gonna bring in the future. It's just simply that, not miracles, but rather nature. Right? So beings of fire, yeah, that will be an accurate description. The melanated people, right, the African, they're not people on fire. That's why they can also die from too much sun exposure. But they are rather good at absorbing light at a cellular level. Let's say molecular level. Because I'm speculating the crystal of melanin, its true color can only be viewed under the sun. Remember that Spider-Man lizard I showed you the other day from the other video? The one found in Mwanza? It has a blue coloration, and I think I done told you this once. Blue in nature does not exist, because blue is not a color. Blue is a shape. Right? So a melanated person can temporarily withstand the fire, right? Longer than a person with less melanin. And that's the glitch on both sides, right? Why can't they withstand fire for longer, and why can these people stand the fire for less time? Pressure is the same, right? The particles from the sun are moving at the same speed, exerting the same pressure. But for some, because their crystals were altered to have a certain arrangement, right? That's why in the history books the Sudanese were described as blue, because the only time true melanin is revealed, even for, they call it tanning. What do you think that is? It's because it can only be seen under the sun, right? So for me, since the fire is within, I'm not keeping it, it is permanently there, came with it. Supercharging everything near the fire, right? And of course that has positive and what I would call unintended consequences, right? For instance, clothing, right? What happens when you exert or you push electricity through the air, right? The air cools down. After cooling down, it becomes water. After water becomes ice, right? So if I put on a type of clothing which the material retains water, okay, retains water, that means I'll be feeling colder than the average temperature of people around me, because the clothing not only holds water but also electricity charge, right? Small things like those. But here where I am is exactly where I am supposed to be. The pressure is just right, the heat is just right, so I'm fine. If I were to be moved, because I won't move myself, no way. there will be consequences, right? That we know of. Right? So no genius don't get no idea, right? And later on came to find out that emotions indeed have an impact on the field, right? So I had to learn a lot of emotion modulation, right? Once went to a funeral and accidentally caused a storm. Yeah, because lighting again is pressure, how it is formed. I can notice it, right? In order for the field that shoots up from me to the sky to actually form lightning clouds, pressure drops where I am, right? Start yawning and stuff. That's when I notice. Right? Because again, stabilizing the pressure. Then the vortex above me, above the ionosphere they call it, spins as it does, crystals bump into each other, lightning. Crazy stuff. So yeah, cannot be moved, cannot move, right? The last time I took a plane, I had lots of pain because of pressure, right? That's the first thing I noticed, because my body reacts to it immediately. Well, that's plasma for you. Crazy stuff. But real, right? So if the ether does not exist, then free energy does not exist also, right? But are people ready under current circumstance to wield such power? Are human beings ready to wield such power, right? Now they already have rules and laws and stuff prohibiting themselves from using the tech, right? That's a vortex right there, right? That's a vortex. And the rings, exactly that. When the ether, these are the places where the ether has been touched, right, to create this zone of low pressure below, rising up to high pressure, right? So like a funnel, right? So this answers this question that I saw, right? So if we create a funnel, we know where the low pressure is and where the high pressure is, right? So whatever happened here happened exactly how the line pushed, right? The energy did not increase, it decreased, going to rest. That's the principle, right? So yeah, don't know what happened, wasn't good. Right? It wasn't good. That area was damaged extremely. But again, if it's not back, then there is residue still of I don't know, radiation still existing. But yeah, if you know how to charge, or rather to discharge, you can bring back the green on the fauna. I don't figure that out. The problem is, are people ready for such technology? That's the trouble I've been having. So anyway, I'm gonna put a pin on it right there. Prince Easy, love you, bye.